I'm Sam Barra for Class Winners Collector Vehicles, and it's finally a nice spring day. So you know what that means? It's convertible weather. This thing is great. Today, we're driving in a 1987 Jaguar XJS V12 HE Hess and Eisenhardt convertible. Jaguar only made about 2,100 of these cars between 1986 and 1988. Back in that day, this car was basically built at Jaguar's factory as a hardtop coupe. And because they hadn't quite tooled up to make their own convertible yet, they sent them out to specialty coach builder Hess and Eisenhardt, the same company that made presidential limousines, to have them converted into a full drop-top convertible. And what makes this car so much better than the factory convertibles that started coming out in 1988 is that the convertible top actually goes down into the rear, so you don't have a top stacked up and back blocking your view, and it keeps those lines really clean. Now, it would be very easy to consider this a non-factory conversion, but in fact it was the Jaguar factory that had these built and sent to dealers. So this is a factory convertible. It's just a very rare and desirable one. If you grew up in America during the 70s, 80s, and 90s, or even the 2000s, you're going to have a very different view of Jaguars, or Jaguar as they're called here in America by most people. Honestly, they're undervalued. They're seen as kind of a snooty luxury car that is really unreliable. But that's really not an accurate depiction. Sure, there were years where it was truly accurate to call them unreliable. You know, the British Leyland years of the 70s and the early 80s. But honestly, by the mid to late 80s and the 90s, Jaguars were just as reliable as Mercedes. Case in point, my cousin's wife bought one of these cars in white with the license plate PRRR, back when it was new, and she drove it for decades as her daily driver and never had a problem. It was just a classy, reliable Grand Tourer. Make sure you keep these out of the hands of a Bubba mechanic. What powers this car is a single overhead cam 5.3 liter V12. In this version, the HE, or high efficiency version, it makes 263 horsepower. It is a big engine. It's very wide. It's also all aluminum, but still very heavy. It draws its heritage from a race engine that Jaguar developed for its endurance racers, but it actually never saw production as a race engine. Initially, the engines had problems with cooling and a host of other issues, but by the 80s, when it became fuel injected, it was a smooth, very reliable engine. You know, V12s are not supposed to be 0 to 60 cars, but this car will actually get out of its own way. It's coming up on cam, and oh, there's 60. Just about, yeah. So, I mean, 0 to 60 is about 8 seconds. That's not a rocket ship, but Again, these are designed for high-speed touring. The car will go 145 miles an hour, and that's true sports car stuff for 1987. But even if it isn't designed to be a sports car, what is handling like? Well, despite the fact that it is a heavy car, over 4,200 pounds, it corners like it's about, well, at least 750 pounds lighter. Part of this is because it's got, well, dual shocks at each corner and springs in back. And the power steering, although it doesn't have great steering feel like most Jaguars, you do know where your wheels are pointed. And it doesn't wallow. It's actually pretty impressive because in this era, heavy cars felt heavy and they tended to dive into corners. This just doesn't. You can rush it through the corners and it's fun. Again, you're not going to get that BMW steering feel, but I bet this would take a 7 Series BMW in any type of handling course. And now let's talk brakes. Jaguar actually has discs up front, normal outboard discs, and in the rear it has inboard discs to reduce the unsprung weight at the wheels, which helps with the handling. So what does that translate to? Let's find out. 3, 2, 1. Wow! Those really bite hard. Again, you'd never guess this car weighs as much as it does, because the engineers took everything into account and just made everything work. This car ergonomically is awesome. First of all, when Hess and Eisenhardt cut the top off of these, they gave a tremendous amount of more headroom, not just with the top down, but also with the top up. A normal XJS coupe, I can't even fit in because my knees are locked into the dash and my head's locked into the top. But because this is a 2-seater and not a 2+2 like the coupe, there's actually room to have the seat further back, and the top is actually further up. Seats are very comfortable, ergonomics are good, everything falls to the hand. It's just a really comfortable car. These leather seats are great. Inevitably, there are going to be people who really want to know which is the better GT convertible with a V12. Is it the Jaguar XJS or is it the Mercedes R129 SL600? Now look, I've got a lot of miles in both of them. And I can tell you that if you're over 6 feet tall, this is a terrible car. You can't fit. It's just really horribly uncomfortable. This one is extremely comfortable. Now, if you're under 6 feet tall, the calculus changes, because if you fit in that well, that's faster. That's got more creature comforts. It feels like a much newer car because it is. This is more like the R107s, the 1970s and 80s Mercedes. I mean, that's the competition for this. But honestly, if I had to choose one, I'd take this one. Sure, this has a reputation for being a little finicky, but nothing in comparison to an R129, where there's so much technology. It's simply tough to keep up with all the things that can potentially go wrong with it. In pure driving dynamics, yeah, this feels faster, and it is. But this handles better. So, strawberry, chocolate, and vanilla. whatever you like and you think is better after driving both, you get to make the decision. I think they're both beautiful cars in their own way. But at the end of the day, I gotta fit in. So if I had to keep one of these, I'd probably keep this one. But whatever car you decide to keep, and put it in the comments below, have fun with it, or with whatever you drive. I'm Sam Bear for Class Winner Collector Vehicles. Go out and drive on beautiful spring days.